Hi, this is JD, and in this lecture we're going to go over solving a system of equations and an introduction to polynomials. So here's an overview of what we're going to be covering. So first we're going to be covering solving a system of equations. There's two main methods to solving a system of equations: substitution, elimination. And then we're going to look at polynomials, exponents, and then definitions. Alright, so here's an example of substitution method. So what you do is you're basically going to substitute. So I already have y by itself, y equals 2x. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace the y with 2x. Now once I replace y with 2x, now I just have x plus 2x equals 6. Notice that it's just in terms of x. So now I can solve for x. So x plus 2x is 3x, so that's 3x equals 6. Now what I can do is I can divide both sides by 3. And then I get x equals 2. 6 divided by 3 is 2. Now we found the x. Now you want to find the y. So to find the y, you just plug it into one of these equations. Since y equals 2x is, the y is already by itself, it's easier to plug in 2 into there, but it doesn't really matter. You can plug it into either one and still get the same answer. So y equals 2x, replace the x with 2. So it's 2 times 2. When a number is right next to a variable, it's multiplication. So that would be y equals 4. And so I found my x, found my y. So my solution would be 2, 4. Let's look at another example. And this time we're going to do elimination. When you do elimination, you want to eliminate one of the variables. And you do this by adding the equations together. But you want to make them the opposite. So I have plus positive 1y minus 1y. Those are opposites of each other, so that when I add them together, the y's are going to cancel. X plus x is 2x, and 6 plus negative 4 is positive 2. Once you have that, you can just solve for x. So you just divide both sides by 2. So you get x equals 1. Then you can do substitution. You can plug in 1 into either of these. I'm going to use the top because there's less negative numbers. Now I'm replacing the x with 1. So I have 1 plus y equals 6. You can probably guess what y is, but I'm going to subtract both sides by 1. And I get y equals 5. My x is 1, my y is 5, so that's my answer, 1, 5. What if you have a more complicated system of equations? And you want to use the elimination method. So you take your two equations. Now you want to decide what to eliminate. So let's eliminate the y's here. So that means I am multiplying this top part by 5 and this by 2. Now the reason why I'm doing that is so I can get them opposites of one another. So I can make this a negative 10 and make this a positive 10. Now when you multiply an equation by 5, you're multiplying everything by 5. So that would be 15x minus 10y equals negative 30. You're doing the same thing with this. You multiply everything by 2, including the negative 8. So that would be 8x plus 10y equals negative 16. Those are opposites of one another. So I'm going to add those two equations together. 15x plus 8x is 23x. The y's cancel. Negative 30 plus negative 16 is negative 46. So then what you want to do is just solve for x. So you want to just divide off the 23. So I divide both sides by 23, and I get x equals negative 2. Now I still have to find what y is, so I'm going to take one of these equations. Again, it doesn't matter which. Taking the first one, 3x minus 2y equals negative 6. Replacing x with negative 2. And now I just solve for y. So it becomes negative 6 minus 2y equals negative 6. Add 6 to both sides. And I get negative 2y equals 0. Divide both sides by negative 2. Y equals 0. My x is negative 2. My y is 0. The solution is a point, so write it as a point. Parentheses, negative 2 comma 0. Close parentheses. Now we're going to move on from system of equations to things more related to polynomials. And so here we're going to look at the exponent rules. So the product rule is when you have a times a to the n, that means the bases are the same and you're multiplying, so you add the powers together. The quotient rule is when you're dividing. So when you're dividing, you subtract the powers. And wherever you start at, that's where you put the result. So if you start with the top, that would be 5 minus n, and you put that in the top. If you start with the denominator and do n minus m, then you would put the results in the denominator. So it would be 1 over that. I'll show you more. I'll show you some concrete examples in a moment. But for right now, when you're multiplying, you add the powers. When you divide, you subtract. Now the power rule is when it's raised to a power. When it's raised to a power, you multiply it. So that would be m times n. The negative exponent rule doesn't make it negative, but it makes it smaller. Unless it's a fraction, then it makes it larger. But anyways, reciprocal, you bring it, you flip it, you can flip it, or you can just put it 1 over that. The one exponent rule is dealing with 1. Any base raised to the first power is that number. And the 0 exponent rule is anything raised to 0 power is 1. Alright, so let's go through the rules. So the product rule, you have x to the 3 times x to the 4. You're multiplying them, so you add the powers together. So that would be 3 plus 4, which is 7. Here you're dividing y to the 10th over y to the 5th. When you're dividing, you subtract, so that would be 10 minus 5, which is 5. Remember the power rule? So this is x to the 5th raised to the 3rd power. Since the whole thing is being raised to the 3rd power, you would multiply them. So that would be 5 times 3, which is 15. The negative exponent rule flips it, or it brings it down to the, if it's in the numerator, it brings it down to the denominator and vice versa. Here, it's in the numerator. You can put it over 1 if you want, and then bring it down. So that would be 1 over x to the 4th. Now, 123,320 and 567 thousandths raised to the 0 power. Anything raised to 0 power is just 1. So let's look at, this is, I think, product of power rules. So I'm going to rewrite it. Now, it is complicated, but what you can do first is you can simplify it. So negative 30 over 10 is 3. A raised to the 14th over a to the 8th. You would subtract those, so that would be a to the 6. And then you would subtract the b's as well, but just be careful because of the negative. 9 minus a negative 2 is positive 11. So you can simplify what's on the inside first, and then raise everything to the 3rd power. So negative 3 raised to the 3rd power would be negative 27. A to the 6 raised to the 3rd power, you would multiply the 6 and the 3, so it becomes 18. And then you would do the same thing with the 11. This is b to the 11th raised to the 3rd power, so you would multiply the 11 and the 3, and you get 33. So your final answer is negative 27, a to the 18th times b to the 33rd power. Now let's go over some definitions. When it comes to polynomials. So you have, if it asks for variables, it's asking for the variable portion. Like, what's the first term, what's the second term? First term, whatever appears first. So that would be m squared. Variable portion of the second term would just be m. Now the coefficients refer to the number in front of the variable. So m squared, the coefficient there would be 3/7. The coefficient for m, now if there isn't one, you assume that it's 1. And here, take the sign as well, so that would be a negative 1. If it's positive, you don't have to write it. Only when it's negative, or when it's a minus, take it as a negative. Now the constant is what doesn't have a variable attached to it, so that would be the 1/2. So variables are referring to the variable portions, and if you see that word coefficient, it refers to the number in front of the variables. Now, if there's not a number, there still is a number, which is 1. So just be careful of that. Alright, so let's review. We went over system of equations. We went over 2 methods, substitution and elimination. We also went over the exponent rules, the product rule, quotient rule, negative exponent rule, power rule, 0 exponent rule, 1 exponent rule. When we went over polynomials and definitions. So coefficient is a number in front of the variable, where the variable portion is talking about the variable with the exponent. So that's it. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. And if you have any questions, put them in the comments below. Thank you, and I hope you have a wonderful week.